Hello there and welcome to my channel. I'm Cody the Coin Raptor, and in today's video we're going to be talking about some interesting news coming out of DCG and some potential selling pressure that we could be seeing on Bitcoin. And before we get to that, be sure to subscribe, be sure to hit that like button, and be sure to follow me on X. All right, so we're going to get right into it. Bitcoin has been moving sideways, but that's not really news. Okay, we can go ahead and take a look at our Bitcoin chart TA. We can see here, after I've stretched out the support and resistance lines, that we've been basically moving sideways since about the beginning of December or so. So the past couple of months, apart from a pop-up here and a breakdown over here, we've been relatively sideways, okay? So Bitcoin doesn't tend to remain sideways for very long. Normally, we see certain periods of consolidation just moving sideways before a large breakout or before a large breakdown. Now, as an example, I can show you guys what happened back in September, October, where Bitcoin went sideways for almost 2-3 months or so and failed to really go anywhere until after it broke out of about 27K in this area right here and then pushed much higher. So it's likely that we're in kind of a consolidation period, and it's likely either we'll see Bitcoin break out or break down after it's finished with this consolidation. But there's some really interesting news that came out today that I want to talk about, and that is that the crypto company Genesis, which recently filed for bankruptcy, is seeking court approval to sell $1.6 billion in the trust assets, of which 1.4 billion are shares in GBTC, or the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. All right, so Genesis, long beleaguered and now looking for ways to right a lot of their debts. They're trying to sell this $1.4 billion in GBTC shares. And with GBTC's conversion over into a Bitcoin spot ETF, that means as the shares are sold, you're going to see GBTC go and sell Bitcoin accordingly. Okay. So if you go on GBTC's website, you can see here that the Bitcoin per share is 0.00893327. And if you take $1.4 billion, which is what they're planning on selling, and divide it by the share price of about $38, you get to 36,842,105. And then you multiply that by the Bitcoin per share, and you get approximately 32,900 Bitcoin. So that would be about as much as they would be selling if they were granted permission in order to sell those shares. I know that sounds like a large number, and it is a rather large number. However, it's important to point out that this isn't the first time we've seen something like this happen in the space. In fact, we actually had something similar happen when FTX decided that they were going to be selling $1 billion worth of Grayscale's a Bitcoin ETF, and they actually sold $1 billion since its approval, and that may have actually been one of the leading factors where we saw Bitcoin make this huge move downwards, and when it went all the way down to about 38,500. Now, I also want to go ahead and emphasize that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen instantly, or we're just going to see a huge amount of selling going on in a couple day period. It could take months, okay? It could take weeks, it could take months. It's not even really a guarantee that they're even going to be able to actually get approval for this. But Genesis is trying to do this right now so they can pay their debts. And I think that this is kind of a leftover from the total disaster of 2022, in which many of these crypto companies went under. So just something to pay attention to. This will probably wind up being a weight on Bitcoin's price, at least in the near term, when Genesis actually gets approval to sell those shares. Now, what's interesting about this is that Genesis is actually part of Digital Currency Group, which also owns, if you go all the way down here, they also own GBTC, or Grayscale, as well. So they own Grayscale and they also own Genesis as well. So what's interesting about that, you guys may remember Barry Silbert, the CEO of DCG, who was beefing earlier with the Winklevoss twins over Gemini. And it seems like yet again they're kind of adding more fuel to the fire of potential Bitcoin selling. So this is just something that I think you guys should watch out for. And if I get any more information on this, I'll definitely let you know. We'll do a follow-up video. We'll talk about it. We'll go ahead and keep in mind that the number of shares that are being sold, the number of Bitcoin that are being sold after this point could be actually due to that settlement being approved. So keep that in mind. And again, I want to kind of put this in context. And I want to go ahead and kind of contrast that with where we are with Bitcoin miners, who I've also said have been a cohort that have been selling. If you take a look at CryptoQuant and you go to the Bitcoin miners reserve, that gives you an idea of how many Bitcoin are in miners' wallets. You can actually see that we're at a new low in the number of Bitcoin in miners' wallets. And they've gone all the way from about 1.863 million down to where they are right now, which is about 1.826 million. All right, so they've had significant amounts of selling, and they've actually hit a new low. In fact, this level hasn't actually been hit since back in 2021. So miners right now are taking profits. If we were to take a look at how that looks on the exchange reserve, we can go ahead and see the number of Bitcoin in the exchanges right now sitting at about 2 million or so. So if they did wind up selling, then and GBTC had to sell, then you're looking at that inflow of potentially 1.2 million Bitcoin versus the on exchange amount here of about 2 million or so. So it's actually a pretty significant amount. But again, I don't expect it's going to happen all at once, and it's not even a certainty that it will happen. But this is something that I absolutely need to talk about. That way if it does happen, then we're not being completely caught off guard. Now, another bit of interesting information that happened was the El Salvador's president Bukele actually seems like he's going to win in El Salvador. And now the reason why this is important is because he has actually been a fierce proponent of Bitcoin. Now, he made El Salvador the very first country in the world to accept Bitcoin as a legal currency, and it seems as though he is going to be reelected. So I have no doubt that his pro-Bitcoin policies will continue. Next, also very interesting news, there is a trial that's starting today that's for this man here, Craig Wright, who claims to be Satoshi Nakamoto, the person who created Bitcoin. And Stephen Wright has been saying that he's Satoshi Nakamoto, and this nonprofit organization, a Crypto Open Patent Alliance, is trying to basically prove that he's been lying. So the reason why this is important is because if Wright does win, then he could get intellectual property rights over the Bitcoin white paper, for instance, and it's very possible that he can exert other pressure over Bitcoin itself. Okay, so especially when it comes to the source code. So he could potentially have access to source code and a copyright over the source code. So that would be very interesting if that actually winds up happening. And again, if I get more information, I'll definitely let you guys know. This is something that's happening right now and has started, and we'll see basically where this winds up. So all this kind of plays into the current Bitcoin price. And I do think that with the Bitcoin price being the way it is, I think that we're likely headed sideways for a little bit. The bullish sentiment has been very weak over the past month or so, ever since the Bitcoin spot ETF kind of blow off top that we saw up here. The sentiment has overall been kind of weak. We have about 80 days or so until the next Bitcoin halving. So that's going to be the next major event that could propel Bitcoin much higher. But I think until then, we're going to be moving sideways, I think, in the near term. Now, we also have some important events going on this week. Michael Saylor announced that MicroStrategy is going to be they're going to be releasing their financials, and they're also going to be discussing their Bitcoin strategy as well. That's going to be tomorrow, okay, after the market closes. So MicroStrategy has the largest number of Bitcoins owned by any publicly traded company. So anything they talk about with Bitcoin may move the market. So make sure you guys are aware of that. And depending on what's happening here, how many they've bought, how many they've or how many they're going to buy, or if they ever plan on selling. They might actually post that information during those financial results and that press release. Next, we have the U.S. economic calendar as well. Now, we had not a lot really going on Monday here. We had some Fed president speaking. Tuesday, we have some more Fed president speaking. Wednesday, we had trade deficit and consumer credit, and then some more Fed president speaking. Thursday, jobless claims. And Friday, you may get some CPI revisions as well. So there's a lot going on this week when it comes to Fed presidents speaking and Fed governors speaking. So it's entirely possible, like what happened today in the traditional markets, where you had the Fed chair Jerome Powell give an interview over the weekend saying, we're not expecting to cut anytime soon, and that kind of dropped the market down a little bit, the traditional market, and stocks took a hit. But it's entirely possible that we'll see, one of these Fed presidents will speak and they'll say something very hawkish about the interest rates, and then all of a sudden everything will be moving down again. So it's definitely possible. Maybe it'll be bullish. That's also a possibility, but I think it's a lower possibility. So let me know what you guys think about what we talked about here today. Do you guys actually think that Genesis will get the approval? And if that's the case, if we are going to expect to see $1.4 billion worth of GBTC shares weigh on the price of Bitcoin, leave a comment below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.